Welcome. Today we're digging into the latest shifts in U.S.-China trade relations, looking at some key reports from Politico and the Washington Times.
That's right. We're focusing specifically on recent tariff decisions, especially around electronics.
Yeah, our aim is to sort of pull out the really crucial information, why certain electronics were exempted from tariffs, and how China responded.
And it really affects major players like Apple and the whole semiconductor scene. It's a good snapshot of global trade complexity.
Definitely gives you a sense of how interconnected everything is. Seems like one decision can ripple out pretty far.
Oh, absolutely. It's like a domino effect, really. A tariff move here triggers strategic responses over there.
Okay, so let's start with those exemptions for electronics. President Trump made a specific call there.
Correct. Things like smartphones, computers, other common electronics, they were kept out of the wider reciprocal tariffs.
And that must have been a huge relief for tech companies, particularly Apple, right?
Hmm.
Given how much they make in China.
Exactly. Apple manufactures, something like 90% of iPhones in China. So tariffs would have directly really hit their costs. A big deal for them.
Right. You can see them getting ready for it, though. They were already exploring moving some production, weren't they, to India and Vietnam.
They were very proactive. We even heard about them chartering planes to basically stockpile inventory just in case tariffs hit.
Wow. Shows the scale we're talking about. And wasn't there something about a green corridor in India?
Yeah, they apparently secured that at Chennai Airport. It cut customs time way down for iPhone shipments coming out of India. Shows how they adapt.
Makes sense. Especially when you hear those estimates like moving just 10% of their supply chain back to the U.S. could cost $30 billion and take 3 years.
Precisely. It underscores how well entrenched these global supply chains really are. Not easy to just shift things around quickly.
Okay, but it wasn't only consumer electronics getting a pass. You mentioned semiconductor manufacturing equipment was also exempt.
That's right. And this is important. We're talking about the specialized tools needed to actually make advanced chips.
Like what specifically?
Things for wafer fabrication, lithography, etching, deposition, the really high-tech machinery.
And exempting those helps the U.S. chip industry.
Definitely. It lines up with the goals of the 2022 Chips and Science Act, boosting domestic production. It ensures U.S. manufacturers can get the best tools from leading suppliers.
Companies like ASML and Tokyo Electron.
Exactly. And those suppliers have global operations, so it affects manufacturing hubs. Think Taiwan, Mexico, South Korea, the Netherlands, Japan.
Got it. So strategically supporting the U.S. tech base there. But China obviously reacted to all this.
Yeah.
What was their play?
Well, China rolled out a series of countermeasures. Pretty comprehensive, actually.
Starting with tariffs, I assume?
Yes. Additional tariffs on U.S. goods. Some reports suggest they could go as high as 140% on certain items. And there's talk of a broad 34% tariff on basically all U.S. imports starting April 2025.
34%. That's pretty significant across the board. Was it just tariffs?
Oh, no, it went further. They've expanded export restrictions, especially on rare earth materials and critical minerals.
Which are vital for, well, for a lot of tech.
Absolutely. Vital. And on top of that, they've added some U.S. defense and tech firms to their export control list and their unreliable entity list.
Okay, so restricting access and flagging specific companies. Anything else?
Yeah, they launched anti-dumping investigations into some U.S. products and even suspended imports of certain U.S. agricultural goods, though only from specific exporters.
So it feels like a very calculated response hitting specific sectors in the U.S.
Very much so. It targets key areas like energy, technology, and agriculture. It's clearly strategic.
So to recap, the U.S. carves out exemptions for certain tech, maybe to help consumers in its own chip ambitions, and China hits back with a whole toolkit of measures aimed at strategic American industries.
That sums it up pretty well. It really highlights the tit-for-tat nature and, frankly, the complexity of these major trade relationships.
It really does.
Yeah.
And it leaves you thinking, if this back and forth becomes the standard way things operate,
Right.
what kind of long-term strategies do multinational companies even start to develop? How do they navigate this kind of uncertainty going forward?
That's the big question, isn't it? There are no simple answers in this kind of environment.